The stars looked calm from the outside, but inside the broken ship it was chaos. The freighter, Vern's Hope, drifted slowly across a silent stretch of empty space where no signals reached and no help ever came. The ship had been carrying food and medicine for outposts in the outer rim, but after a pirate attack it was now just a dying shell. The engines were gone, power was fading, and oxygen was running out. The crew, 35 beings from 6 different species, had been fighting for their lives for days. The corridors were dark and cold. Sparks from torn wires danced in the air like tiny stars, but even those soon faded. The air recycling systems had failed. The emergency lights flickered weakly, giving the ship a ghostly red glow. Captain Vorak, the Krylon in command, stood near the cracked viewport, staring at the endless night. His kind was known for their calm nature, but even he felt the weight of despair pressing down. Every few minutes he checked the console where the last energy cell kept the distress beacon alive. It blinked slowly, sending out one message over and over. Freighter Vern's Hope in distress, requesting immediate assistance, but no one replied. Days passed, then weeks. Vorak's scales had lost their color. His voice had grown weak, and still there was no sign of rescue. Most of the crew had stopped asking questions. They all knew what it meant to be stranded this far out. No one came here unless they had to. The pirates who attacked them had stolen their cargo and left them to die, assuming the ship would soon break apart or drift into a star. In the engineering section, a small group tried to fix what they could. One of them, a young alien named Reth, refused to stop working. His hands shook from exhaustion, but he kept trying to restart the auxiliary power. Every time he failed, he whispered to himself, "Someone will hear us." The others didn't believe him anymore. Hope had become a cruel joke. Vorak moved slowly through the ship, checking on the survivors. Some were resting, others just stared into the dark, lost in their thoughts. No one had the strength to speak much anymore. The food was nearly gone. The water recycler had failed 2 days ago. He stopped at the medical bay where a soft blue light still glowed. The medic, a quiet being named Lorna, was tending to a crew member with a broken arm. Even in such hopelessness, she worked carefully, as if every small act still mattered. Vorak respected that. "How many left?" he asked in a low voice. 23, she replied without looking up. The rest couldn't make it through the cold. Vorak closed his eyes for a moment. He wanted to say something comforting, but there were no words left. Every breath they took felt borrowed. Later, he returned to the bridge and sat in the captain's chair. The console before him showed nothing but empty stars. He recorded another log entry, maybe his last one. "This is Captain Vorak of the freighter Vern's Hope," he said quietly. "We were attacked by raiders. Engines destroyed. Life support nearly gone. We have sent over 300 distress calls. No response from the council or any nearby ships. If anyone ever finds this message, know that we fought to the end. Know that we did not surrender to fear." His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. When he ended the recording, he sat still for a long time, staring at the blinking red light of the dying beacon. It reminded him of a heartbeat slowing down. Hours later, Reth entered the bridge, his face pale and tired. "Captain," he said softly, "the power reserves will fail soon. Maybe in a day, maybe less," Vorak nodded. "Then we make this day count," he replied, "but what's left to do?" Reth asked. "Stay alive. Until the very end," Vorak said. He gave a small, sad smile. "That's all that matters now." The young engineer didn't know what to say. He looked out the viewport where stars stretched endlessly in every direction. It was strange how beautiful the galaxy looked, even when it had turned its back on them. Time passed slower after that. The crew gathered in the mess hall, though there was nothing left to eat. They sat together in silence, sharing faint warmth and quiet company. Someone hummed an old space tune. The sound echoed gently through the room, a reminder of how fragile life was in the cold vacuum around them. Vorak found himself thinking about the worlds they had once visited, lush, bright, and full of voices. He remembered trading with humans long ago, before their kind pulled away from the galaxy. Humans had always been unpredictable. Some said they were too emotional, too reckless. Others said they were too brave for their own good. But Vorak remembered one thing clearly. Humans never abandoned anyone. He wondered what had happened to them. No one had seen a human ship in decades. The Galactic Council claimed they had turned inward, focusing on their own system. leaving others to their politics and wars. Some even whispered that humanity had fallen, that Earth itself had gone silent. The thought made him sigh. If humans were still out there, maybe they would have come. Maybe they would have answered. That night, or what passed for night in the endless dark, the temperature dropped even lower. The ship's last heat core failed and the metal walls began to freeze. Frost formed along the edges of the consoles. Vorak wrapped his arms around himself, feeling the cold seep into his bones. In the cargo bay, Reth sat beside the communication terminal. The signal light was now dim, flickering like a candle in the wind. He placed his hand on the metal surface and whispered, "Please, someone hear us." The only answer was static. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine what rescue would feel like. A light breaking through the dark, a voice cutting through the silence. But imagination couldn't fight reality forever. He was drifting into half-sleep when he thought he heard something, a faint click almost like a heartbeat. He leaned closer. Maybe it was just his mind playing tricks. Vorak appeared behind him, his footsteps slow and heavy. "What is it?" he asked. "I thought I heard something," Reth said. "A signal, maybe." Vorak shook his head gently. "We've thought that before. I know. But this time it felt different." Vorak looked at the monitor. It showed only lines of interference. The ship's sensors were too weak to pick up much of anything. Still, he wanted to believe. "Keep listening," he said quietly. "If there's even a chance, we'll hold on." Reth nodded and stayed by the console. Vorak walked back toward the bridge. The floor creaked under his steps. He could feel the hum of the dying reactor, like the last breath of a living thing. Hours later, the beacon light flickered one last time and went out. The bridge went completely dark. Vorak stood there, staring at his reflection in the viewport, surrounded by nothing but endless stars. It was over, yet, even in that silence, something stirred, a quiet pulse somewhere far away, faint and broken, traveling through the black. None of them noticed it yet, not then, but the signal had reached further than anyone expected. Out beyond the dying freighter, across frozen dust and sleeping asteroids, the faint echo of their distress call brushed against something ancient, something human. The ship floated like a shadow among the stars. Days had passed since the power finally went out, and silence had become their only companion. Inside the cold hull, the survivors moved slowly, wrapped in emergency blankets, breathing through thin masks that gave them just enough oxygen to stay alive a little longer. Every sound felt louder now. The creak of metal, the distant hiss of air leaks, the faint heartbeat inside their ears reminding them they were still holding on. Captain Vorak didn't sleep anymore. He sat in the dark bridge, watching the same empty view outside the cracked glass. Every now and then he thought he saw a flicker of light among the stars, but it always turned out to be nothing more than a dying sensor or a reflection of his own imagination. Hope had become a cruel visitor, coming only to leave him emptier each time. The young engineer Reth still refused to give up. Even as the others accepted their fate, he spent his hours near the communication console, checking wires and listening to static. The sound filled the room like whispering ghosts. It wasn't pleasant, but it was something. To him, silence was worse. It meant the galaxy had forgotten them. He thought about the stories his grandmother told him when he was a child, stories about humans, strange, loud, unpredictable beings who once filled the stars with their ships and voices. Some said they were reckless, some said they were dangerous, but everyone agreed on one thing: they never left anyone behind. He remembered those words now as he sat in the dark, his hands trembling from exhaustion. Sometimes he whispered them aloud. They never leave anyone behind. Lorna, the medic, walked into the room quietly. She carried a small light, just enough to see her way through. "You should rest," she said gently. "There's nothing more to do." Reth shook his head. "If I stop, we'll all be gone before the next cycle. I just need one signal, one sound." She sighed but didn't argue. She sat beside him, wrapping her arms around her knees. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they couldn't say. The fear, the anger, the wish for one more sunrise on a real world. Suddenly, the static changed. It was small, barely a flicker. But it was different. Reth froze. His eyes widened as he leaned closer to the receiver. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Lorna frowned. "Hear what?" "There. That click. It's not from us." She tilted her head, listening. There was a faint pulse, like a heartbeat lost in the distance. It came once, then again. Reth's breath caught. "That's a pattern," he said, his voice shaking. "It's not random, it's binary. Old code." Vorak appeared in the doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow over them. "What is it?" he asked. Reth pointed at the monitor. "I think someone's trying to reach us. It's an ancient signal format. I've seen it in the archives, human design." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. No human vessel has been seen in centuries." "Maybe," Reth said, almost pleading, "but it's their code. I'm sure of it. Look." He showed the pattern, short pulses and long ones repeating in a rhythm that felt alive. Vorak stared at the display. It was weak, fading in and out. But there was no mistake. Someone or something was sending out a message. "Can you answer it?" Vorak asked. Reth nodded. "I'll try, but our power cells are almost empty. I can give the transmitter one last burst." The captain placed his hand on Reth's shoulder. "Do it." The room filled with soft humming as Reth rerouted what little energy remained. The lights flickered. The old console sparked as the signal burst through the dark. He sent a simple reply in the same code, just 2 words. "We are alive." For a moment, nothing happened. The static returned, colder than before. Reth lowered his head, feeling his chest tighten. Maybe it had been nothing. A ghost signal, a dying satellite repeating old noise. Lorna reached for his hand, ready to comfort him, but then the receiver clicked again. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses again. Then a voice broke through the noise, weak but clear. "Hold position. You are not alone." The words echoed through the cold room like thunder. Reth's heart pounded. Lorna gasped, covering her mouth. Vorak stood frozen, his mind refusing to believe what his ears had heard. "Say it again," he whispered. The voice came again, stronger this time. "Freighter Vern's Hope. This is Terran vessel Valkyrie. Hold position. Assistance is on the way." Terran. Human. The crew rushed into the room, their tired eyes wide with disbelief. Some laughed. Some cried. For weeks they had lived in silence, certain that no one would ever come. Now, out of nowhere, a voice had pierced through the endless dark, and it was human. Reth sent another reply, his hands shaking. "We copy. Systems failing. Life support nearly gone." There was a pause before the human voice responded. "Understood. Do not panic. We have your coordinates. You are safe now." Safe. That word hit them harder than any blast or explosion. It had been so long since they'd heard it. Vorak leaned against the console, feeling something heavy lift from his chest. He had commanded ships in battles and seen worlds fall, but nothing in his life compared to that single moment. Reth stared out the cracked viewport. The stars hadn't changed, but now they looked different, brighter somehow. For the first time since the attack, the darkness didn't feel endless. Somewhere out there, beyond the black sea of space, a human ship was moving toward them. Hours passed. The crew waited in tense silence. They could no longer track the approaching ship because their sensors were dead, but they could feel it, an invisible thread of hope pulling them back to life. Some tried to rest, but most couldn't. They sat together, listening to the faint hum of the receiver, afraid that if they looked away, the voice might disappear again. Reth checked the transmitter one last time. "They're coming," he whispered. "I know they're coming." Vorak nodded. "Humans," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Of all the species in this galaxy, they were the ones who never stopped looking for lost souls." The crew exchanged glances. Many had only heard stories about humans. Warriors, explorers, dreamers who had once shaped half the galaxy before vanishing into their own systems. No one knew why they left. Some said they grew tired of the Council's politics. Others believed they were preparing for something greater. Whatever the truth, no one had seen a Terran ship in lifetimes. And yet, here they were, answering a call that no one else had heard. As time moved slowly, Vorak recorded a new log entry. His voice was still weak, but now there was strength behind every word. This is Captain Vorak of the Vern's Hope. To any who find this record, remember this moment. When all others turned away, it was humans who heard our cry. It was humans who reached through the silence. He stopped, his throat tightening. If we survive this, I will never forget it. Outside, the stars continued their quiet watch. The freighter drifted slowly, powerless, but no longer alone. Somewhere beyond the edge of their failing sensors, engines roared softly against the void. The sound was faint but steady, a rhythm of life, cutting through the emptiness. Reth looked up from his console. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Lorna nodded, her eyes wide. "Yes, it sounds like thunder." Vorak stepped closer to the viewport. In the far distance, something moved. At first, it was just a shimmer, a shadow passing between the stars. Then, a faint glow appeared, followed by another. Lines of light traced across the dark until a massive shape took form. It was enormous, unlike any ship they had ever seen. Its surface reflected the distant starlight like glass, and steel merged into one. There were no banners, no colors, just the silent power of something ancient and human. Reth's voice broke as he spoke. They came. The human warship approached with calm precision, its engines burning bright against the endless night. It did not broadcast victory, it did not shout. It simply moved forward, steady, unstoppable, alive. For the first time since the pirates had attacked, the crew of the Vern's Hope began to believe again. They pressed their hands to the cold glass, watching as the ship drew closer, its light spreading across the freighter's broken hull. In that quiet moment, every survivor realized something simple but powerful. It wasn't technology or weapons that made humans feared across the stars. It was their refusal to look away from suffering. It was their will to answer when everyone else stayed silent. The voice on the radio spoke once more, calm and firm. "This is Valkyrie, we have you on visual. Hold on, friends, you're coming home." And just like that, the silence of space broke, not with noise, but with hope. The light from the human ship grew brighter as it came closer, cutting through the darkness like dawn after a long night. The freighter's crew stood frozen, staring through the cracked viewports. For so long they had seen nothing but shadows and stars, and now something real was moving toward them. Alive, powerful, human. The ship was huge, built for war but moving with calm grace. Its hull was black and silver, scarred with old battle marks that told stories of fights long past. On its side, faint letters glowed through the dust. TSS Valkyrie. No one spoke for a long moment. They just watched. It didn't seem real. A human warship here at the edge of forgotten space, answering a call no one else had cared to hear. Reth's voice broke the silence. "They found us," he whispered. His hands trembled over the dead console. They really came. Captain Vorak stood tall, his eyes wet with relief he didn't try to hide. He had seen many things in his long service. Victories, defeats, betrayals, but this was different. This was hope returning from extinction. The ship slowed as it approached, moving into position beside the drifting freighter. Its light swept across the Vern's Hope, revealing the damage, the holes in the hull, the scorch marks, the scars left by the pirates. For a moment it was as if the Valkyrie was silently studying them, deciding how to help. Then a voice came through the radio again, calm and steady. "Freighter Vern's Hope, this is Valkyrie Command. We have your location. Prepare for boarding assistance." The sound of that voice filled every corner of the dying ship. It wasn't cold or mechanical. It carried warmth, control, and something more, care. Vorak leaned toward the receiver. "This is Captain Vorak. We didn't think anyone would come." A soft chuckle came through the static. "You called. We listened. That's how it's always been." The words hit deep. Vorak lowered his head and simply said, "Thank you." Within minutes, bright lights from the Valkyrie's docking arms reached out and locked onto the freighter's side. A soft tremor shook the old metal as the connection sealed. Then through the airlock came a sound none of them expected to hear again. The firm steps of humans. The first human officer who entered wore a dark suit marked with a silver emblem. His helmet reflected the faint light hiding his face. Behind him came more humans carrying equipment and supplies. The air smelled different around them, clean, sharp, alive. One of the humans spoke, her voice clear through the translator. "We're here to help. Don't be afraid." No one moved at first. The survivors had forgotten what kindness sounded like. Then Lorna stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Our systems failed. People are injured. We didn't think anyone would find us." The human nodded gently. "You're safe now. We'll get you home." The words spread through the crew like sunlight through ice. Some began to cry quietly. Others just stood there as if afraid that moving might break the spell. The humans worked fast. They set up portable oxygen generators, distributed water packs, and treated the wounded. Every movement was precise but filled with quiet empathy. They didn't just save lives, they made the survivors feel human again. Reth watched them with wide eyes. He had read about human ships, about their efficiency, their power, their fearsome reputation in battle. But no story had ever mentioned this side of them, the gentle way they spoke, the calm confidence in their eyes. He noticed how they checked on every single survivor, even those too weak to speak. When Vorak approached the human leader, he hesitated. "Why did you come?" he asked quietly. No one else even answered our signal. The human removed his helmet, revealing a calm, weathered face. His eyes were sharp but kind. "Because someone needed help," he said simply. "That's reason enough." Vorak frowned slightly. "But you're kind." "You disappeared from the galaxy. No one's seen a Terran warship in generations." The human gave a faint smile. "We never disappeared. We just stopped talking. Sometimes the galaxy forgets how to listen." The answer carried weight. Vorak didn't fully understand it, but he knew it meant something deeper than words. Humanity hadn't abandoned the stars. They had simply chosen when to speak and when to act. The humans transferred the survivors to the Valkyrie one by one. Each person stepping through the docking tunnel felt like crossing from death to life. The air inside the warship was warm, full of the soft hum of living systems. It was like entering another world. As Reth stepped aboard, he stopped and looked around in awe. The corridors were clean and bright, lined with soft light panels. Everything felt solid, built with purpose. The humans guided them gently, giving directions, offering smiles that somehow carried more reassurance than any words could. For the first time in weeks, Reth felt his chest relax. He could breathe properly. The fear that had followed him since the attack began to fade. He turned to one of the human crew members walking beside him. "How did you find us? We were so far out. Our signal shouldn't have reached anyone." The human looked ahead, her eyes focused but voice kind. "It wasn't the signal that reached us," she said. "It was the silence," Reth blinked. "Silence?" She nodded. The Valkyrie listens for what the galaxy forgets to hear. The quiet, the missing voices, the places no one bothers to check. "We found you because no one else was looking." The words made him pause. It was strange, almost poetic, but somehow it made sense. Humans had always been different. They didn't see the galaxy as lines and rules. They saw it as lives, hearts, and stories. In the med bay of the Valkyrie, Lorna helped the human doctors tend to the wounded. She watched how they worked, how calm and focused they were, and she couldn't help but smile. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe they might live to see another sunrise. Meanwhile, in the command room, Vorak stood beside the human captain, looking through the large observation window. The stars stretched endlessly, but now they didn't look so lonely. "Captain," Vorak said softly, "what will happen to us now?" The human turned toward him. "We'll take you back to the nearest council station," he said. "You'll be safe there. But I'll warn you, our appearance may cause a stir. The council hasn't seen one of our ships in a long time." "Why return now?" Vorak asked. "After all this time, after all the silence." The human's gaze drifted back to the stars. "Because the galaxy forgot what it means to care," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to remind them." Vorak studied him for a moment. He realized that the human wasn't speaking for himself alone. He was speaking for an entire species. A species that had once fought harder, dreamed bigger, and loved deeper than anyone else. Hours later, the Valkyrie began to turn. Its engines glowed bright blue, shaking the air as it prepared to leave. Through the ship's wide observation window, Reth watched as the wreck of the Vern's Hope grew smaller behind them. The freighter had been their prison and their home, but now it would be just a memory. He felt a mix of sadness and relief. The ship that had nearly been their tomb was now a symbol of something greater, the moment when silence was broken and humanity returned. He turned to the human officer beside him. "You really came for us," he said quietly. "After so long, after everyone else gave up." The officer smiled faintly. "That's what humans do. We come when others don't." Outside, the stars passed slowly. The Valkyrie moved like a guardian through the dark, guiding the survivors toward safety. And though none of them could say it aloud, they all felt the same thing deep inside. Something had changed in the galaxy that day. The legend of humanity, the one whispered in fading stories and forgotten logs, was no longer just a legend. It was alive again, burning bright across the cold silence of space. And somewhere far beyond the stars, the message began to spread. Someone had called for help, and humans had answered. The human warship moved like a shadow of power and grace through the dark sea of stars. From the viewing deck of the Valkyrie, the rescued crew stood in silence, watching the endless stretch of space ahead. Some were still weak from the long days of starvation and cold, others too stunned to speak. But every single one of them knew one thing. This ship had saved them when no one else had even listened. The inside of the Valkyrie felt alive. The hum of its systems was steady like a heartbeat. Warm air filled the corridors. Soft lights glowed along the walls, and the sound of quiet footsteps echoed through the decks. The rescued crew could finally breathe again, their lungs no longer filled with the thin, dying air of their broken freighter. Reth walked slowly through the corridor, running his fingers along the smooth metal surface of the wall. The ship didn't feel like the cold, military vessels he had read about. It felt different, like it carried memories, pride, and something unspoken. He passed human crew members along the way, and each of them nodded politely, their faces calm and focused. They didn't act like heroes, yet to everyone watching them, that's exactly what they were. In the command room, Captain Vorak stood beside the human commander, looking through the massive front screen that displayed the stars. The human commander spoke in a low, thoughtful tone. "Your ship was drifting near the edge of uncharted space. You were lucky we were listening." "Luck had little to do with it," Vorak replied. "No one else even noticed our distress call. The council ignored it. The pirates left us to die. Only you came." The human commander gave a faint smile. "Sometimes silence is the loudest sound in the galaxy. We listen for that." Vorak studied him quietly. "Your people have changed," he said. "The stories told about humans were different. They said you were warriors, not rescuers." The human turned his gaze toward the stars. "Maybe both can be true," he said softly. "We learned long ago that strength means nothing if it's not used to protect." There was something in his voice that carried history, something old, like the echo of battles and sacrifices. Vorak didn't ask more. He didn't need to. In another part of the ship, Reth found himself inside the observation bay, where one wall was made entirely of reinforced glass. From there, he could see the broken remains of their old freighter, still floating far behind, barely visible now. It looked so small and fragile. A piece of his life was left behind with it. But he didn't feel sadness. He felt something else, rebirth. A human officer walked in and stood beside him. "Hard to look away, isn't it?" Reth nodded. "That ship was our home. Now it's just a shell." The officer crossed his arms. "Sometimes the universe forces you to let go of old things. What matters is what you carry forward." Reth turned to him, curious. "Why did you come back?" "Everyone said humans left the galaxy long ago." The officer smiled faintly. "We never left. We just stopped being part of the noise. When the council started treating people like numbers, when greed became louder than compassion, we chose silence. But silence doesn't mean absence." Reth thought about those words for a long time. Silence doesn't mean absence. It made sense now. The humans hadn't abandoned the galaxy. They had simply watched, waiting for the moment when action mattered again. Meanwhile, deep in the ship's hangar bay, teams of humans worked tirelessly to prepare supplies and repair drones. The survivors watched them with admiration. The precision, the discipline, the quiet teamwork, it all felt natural to the humans, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. Lorna stood near the medical area, where the injured crew were being treated by human doctors. She had never seen such focus. The humans didn't rush, but they wasted no second either. They moved like people who knew the value of every heartbeat. She asked one of them, "Do you always work like this?" The doctor gave a small smile. "When you've seen how fast life can fade, you learn not to waste time." His words stayed with her. Every human she spoke to carried that same quiet fire. They weren't boastful or proud. They just did what needed to be done, and they did it well. Later, as the ship cruised through deep space, an alert tone echoed across the bridge. Vorak looked up, his instincts sharpening. The human commander tapped the console, his expression unchanged. "Multiple signatures ahead," he said calmly. "Pirates. The same group that attacked your freighter by the look of it." The crew of the Vern's Hope tensed. Fear washed through them. The pirates were ruthless and heavily armed. They remembered too well the chaos, the sound of explosions, the screams, but the humans didn't seem worried. "Battle stations," the commander said in a calm, almost quiet tone. The lights on the bridge shifted from white to amber. The sound of movement filled the ship as crew members took their positions. Reth could feel the energy in the air. It wasn't panic, it was readiness. The humans weren't scared. They were focused. Through the viewing window, distant shapes appeared, pirate ships moving in fast, hungry for easy prey. They must have thought the Valkyrie was just another freighter to rob. Vorak's voice was low. "They don't know who they're facing." "No," the human commander said, "they don't." Without any shouting or chaos, the humans began their work. Commands were clear, short, and confident. Energy built up along the ship's hull. The main guns rotated smoothly into position. The Valkyrie didn't roar. It hummed like a predator ready to strike. The pirates opened fire first. Bright streaks of plasma tore through space toward the human warship. For a moment, the survivors held their breath. Then the Valkyrie moved. It didn't dodge wildly. It shifted gracefully, its shields absorbing the blasts like ripples in water. Then with a single order, the ship fired back. The response was silent, fast, and devastating. The first pirate ship exploded before its crew even realized they were targeted. The second tried to flee, but the Valkyrie's tracking systems locked on effortlessly. Another flash, another explosion. In less than a minute, the fight was over. The human ship didn't even have a scratch. The survivors stood in stunned silence. Reth whispered, "They didn't even try to run." Lorna looked at him. "They didn't need to." The commander turned to Vorak. "We don't start fights," he said quietly. "But we end them fast." Vorak nodded slowly. He understood now why the galaxy both feared and respected humans. It wasn't their weapons alone, it was their will. Their belief that action should be swift and purpose clear. As the last of the pirate wrecks disappeared behind them, the Valkyrie resumed its calm pace. No one on the human crew celebrated. No one cheered. They simply went back to work, resetting systems and checking readings as if nothing had happened. Reth finally found the courage to ask the commander, "Why don't you stay? The galaxy needs people like you. You could protect so many." The commander looked thoughtful for a moment. "We don't want to rule the stars," he said. "We just want to make sure they still have light." That simple answer struck deeper than any grand speech could. As the hours passed, the rescued crew began to rest again. The fear that had lived in their hearts since the day of the attack began to fade away. The humans didn't treat them as outsiders. They treated them as equals, as lives worth saving. Before sleep took him, Reth looked out one more time at the stars. The darkness was still there, deep and endless. But now he knew that somewhere out there, human ships like the Valkyrie were watching, listening, waiting for the next call for help. He smiled softly to himself. The stories were true. Humans never left anyone behind. And as the Valkyrie sailed forward through the quiet of space, every being on board could feel it in their hearts. The silence had been broken forever. Humanity had returned not as conquerors but as guardians of hope. The ship drifted through the darkness like a silver ghost. The stars stretched far and endless beyond the viewing deck windows, each one a tiny reminder of how small they all were in the vastness of space. For the rescued crew, the silence of space no longer felt like death. It felt like peace. The human warship, Valkyrie, carried them through that silence with a strength that seemed almost alive. Days passed slowly but calmly. The survivors began to regain their strength, eating real food again, sleeping in warm bunks and feeling safe for the first time in what felt like forever. There was no fear anymore, no cold dread hanging over their heads. But beneath that peace, a quiet curiosity grew. They all wondered the same thing. Who were these humans really? Where had they been all this time? One day, Reth found himself walking through one of the ship's lower decks. The sound of tools and voices echoed softly as humans worked on repairs. He paused beside a technician who was tightening a panel near the engine core. "Your ship is old, isn't it?" Reth asked. The technician smiled without looking up. "Old, yes, but built to last." "Like us," Reth nodded slowly. "You make it sound like your people were always ready for something." The technician wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at him. "We learned a long time ago that peace doesn't last forever. So we prepare not for war but for survival." That line stayed with Reth for hours. Humans had survived everything, the loss of worlds, endless wars, even silence itself. And still they were here. Meanwhile, Captain Vorak sat with the human commander in the observation room. They didn't talk much at first, just watched the stars drift past. Finally, Vorak said quietly, "I've seen hundreds of warships, but I've never seen one move like this. There's purpose in every motion." The commander nodded. "Every ship we build carries memory. The metal remembers what it's been through. We don't erase the scars, we strengthen them." "That's not how most species think," Vorak said. "They hide their wounds." "Wounds are reminders," the human said. "They tell us what not to forget." Vorak understood then that humans didn't just build machines. They built symbols, vessels of memory and meaning. Every plate, every beam, every engine hum carried their history. In the cafeteria, the rescued crew began mingling more with the human crew. The humans shared their food, which had strange but pleasant tastes. The warmth of conversation filled the room. The survivors laughed for the first time since their rescue. One of the younger survivors asked a human officer, "Why did you come for us? You didn't even know who we were." The officer leaned back in his chair and said simply, "Because someone has to." The answer was so calm, so honest, that it silenced the room. There was no pride in his tone, no hero's claim, just truth. Humans didn't save them for fame or reward. They did it because it was right. As the days went by, the survivors began to help around the ship. Some assisted in small maintenance work, others helped in the med bay or kitchen. The humans didn't treat them as guests anymore. They treated them as part of the crew. That sense of belonging filled a space in their hearts that had long been empty. But peace didn't last forever. A distress signal came through one night. It wasn't from the humans, it was from another stranded vessel deeper in the void. The transmission was weak, broken by static, but one thing was clear. It was a call for help. The human commander stood before his crew, calm as always. "Set course," he said. The navigator frowned. "Sir, it's in restricted space. The council forbids entry." The commander didn't even hesitate. The council also forbade listening to us once. "We'll go." The survivors exchanged looks. They couldn't believe it. The humans were about to defy galactic law just to answer a distress call. Vorak stepped forward. "You could be attacked. That region is full of raiders and patrols." The commander looked at him. "If someone's calling for help, they're already surrounded by danger. We'll face it with them." And just like that, the Valkyrie turned its course toward the unknown. The tension grew as they approached the signal's source. Space became darker, the stars fewer. It was an unmarked region known as the Silent Edge, a place no one dared to travel. The survivors had heard stories of ships that entered and never returned, but the humans didn't slow down. Their eyes stayed focused, their hands steady on the controls. The closer they got, the louder the broken signal became. And then through the static, a faint voice came through, a child's voice crying. The entire bridge went silent. The commander's expression hardened. "Bring us in. Full scan." The radar flickered with shapes, wreckage everywhere. Broken ships, debris fields, burned metal drifting in silence. Among them, one weak life signal pulsed faintly. "Lock onto it," the commander ordered. The Valkyrie's searchlights cut through the darkness. The wreck appeared on the screen. A small refugee vessel torn open, barely holding together. Without hesitation, the humans deployed rescue drones. They moved like bright fireflies through the wreckage, searching every compartment. Minutes later, the report came back. "One survivor found," a crew member said. "A child." The bridge was quiet again, filled with the hum of systems and the beating hearts of those who waited. When the airlock finally opened, everyone gathered. Out of the smoke and light, a human soldier carried a small alien child wrapped in a thermal blanket. The child was trembling, weak, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The commander knelt down and spoke softly. "You're safe now." The child didn't understand the words but felt the warmth in the voice. It clung to the commander's hand tightly, refusing to let go. In that moment, no one spoke. The entire crew, humans and survivors alike, watched in silence. The air was thick with emotion. They had seen many kinds of strength on this ship, but this was something deeper. Compassion. The kind that didn't need words or laws to exist. Later, as the child rested in the med bay, Reth asked one of the humans, "Why risk everything for one life?" The man looked at him quietly and said, "Because one life can mean everything. If we forget that, we forget who we are." Reth felt a lump in his throat. He had seen ships flee, governments abandon colonies, and fleets turn away from those in need. But these humans, these quiet warriors, still believed one small voice was worth saving. As the Valkyrie turned away from the silent edge, its engines flaring softly against the dark, the rescued child slept peacefully. The ship carried not just survivors now, but a symbol of what hope looked like when the universe had given up. That night, Reth stood alone by the observation window. The stars glimmered faintly, and the reflection of the human warship shone against the glass. He whispered to himself, "They came for us when no one else would, and they'll keep coming for others." Behind him, the human commander's voice sounded gently. "The galaxy has forgotten what compassion looks like," he said. "Maybe it's time someone reminded them." Reth turned and nodded. "You already have." The commander smiled slightly, his eyes tired but bright. "Then maybe there's still hope left in the dark." And as the Valkyrie sailed onward, the hum of its engines echoed softly through space, a promise that no cry for help would ever again go unheard. Humanity had returned not to rule the stars, but to bring light where none remained. The Valkyrie moved silently through the void, its engines humming with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. The stars stretched endlessly before it, cold and distant, yet somehow less empty now. Inside, warmth filled the halls. The survivors who had once been left to die now walked freely, no longer weak or hopeless. They had found safety, and more than that, they had found something greater, trust in humanity once again. The rescued child slept soundly in the med bay, wrapped in soft blankets. For the first time since they had been found, there was peace. The gentle glow of the ship's lights reflected off polished metal walls, giving everything a calm golden hue. It was a peace so deep that even the memories of fear seemed to fade. Reth stood by one of the large windows, staring into the darkness of space. He had seen so much: loss, despair, silence. And yet here he was, alive because of humans who had come when everyone else turned away. He still couldn't fully understand it. "They had no reason to help us," he whispered to himself. And yet they did. A human officer walked up beside him. "You're thinking too much," the officer said gently, a small smile on his face. "Maybe," Reth replied. "I just keep wondering why. Why do you help people who can't give you anything in return?" The officer's smile faded, replaced by something thoughtful. "Because once we were the ones calling for help." And someone answered, "That's not something you forget." Reth didn't ask who had saved them back then. The tone of the man's voice said it all. It was a story of pain, of learning, of never wanting to repeat the mistakes of the past. In the command room, Captain Vorak stood beside the human commander. The star maps glowed before them, tracing the routes of forgotten worlds and lost colonies. Vorak broke the silence first. "Your ship could be a fleet by itself," he said quietly. "But you don't conquer. You protect. That's rare." The commander looked at the stars for a long moment. "We had our time of conquest," he said finally. "We thought power meant control. But power means nothing if it doesn't protect those who have none." Vorak nodded. "Then you've learned what others still refuse to see." Outside, space shimmered as a nearby nebula cast streaks of color across the hull of the Valkyrie. The view was breathtaking, yet what filled the hearts of those aboard wasn't beauty. It was belonging. Days passed, and the survivors began helping more actively on the ship. Some worked with the engineers, learning about the human machines. Others spent time in the med bay, helping care for the rescued child. It wasn't ordered or expected. It just happened naturally, like life finding its rhythm again. The humans never treated them as outsiders. They shared their meals, taught them small things about ship life, and even told stories from their old worlds. Stories of Earth, a planet long quiet, but still remembered with love. They spoke of blue skies and oceans that never ended, of forests that whispered in the wind, and of the simple beauty of sunlight on stone. When Reth heard those stories, he realized something. Humans hadn't just built ships, they had carried their home with them in their hearts. Even across the coldest galaxies, they never forgot where they came from. One evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall, laughter filled the air. The rescued child, now stronger, was walking on their own. The sound of joy spread through the room like warmth after a storm. It was a moment no one had expected when they were drifting near death. The commander stood near the back, watching quietly. A faint smile touched his face. To him, this was the real victory. Not battles won or enemies defeated, but lives restored, hope rekindled. But then as the laughter faded, a signal alert blinked on the wall panel. The bridge called out through the intercom. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Priority message. The room grew still. Vorak looked at the commander. "They've noticed you," he said quietly. The commander gave a slow nod and turned to leave for the bridge. When he arrived, the council's emblem glowed on the main screen. A stern alien figure appeared, their voice sharp and formal. "Human vessel Valkyrie, you have entered restricted territories and interfered in protected zones. Explain your actions." The commander's voice was calm. "We responded to distress calls. We don't ignore them. That is not your responsibility," the figure snapped. "You have violated interstellar law." The commander's tone didn't change. "Then maybe the law is wrong." There was silence on the other end. The council figure's eyes narrowed. "You think yourself above the council?" "No," the commander said simply. "We just remember what it means to care." The screen went dark. The crew exchanged quiet glances. Vorak sighed softly. "You've made enemies today." The commander shook his head. "No. We've reminded them they still have a conscience." Later, the message spread across the galaxy. Rumors of a human ship that defied the council to save lives. Many didn't believe it at first. Others were inspired. On distant worlds, people whispered the name Valkyrie with awe. For the forgotten and the abandoned, that name meant hope. Weeks passed, and the Valkyrie continued its journey, rescuing stranded ships, bringing aid to ruined outposts, helping those left behind. Every act of kindness spread like ripples in a quiet pond. Slowly, the silence that had once filled the galaxy began to fade. In time, even the Galactic Council was forced to take notice. Reports came from across systems, humans seen helping where no one else dared to go. The Council could not punish compassion forever. One evening, the human commander stood again at the observation window, looking out into the endless dark. Reth joined him. "You've changed everything," Reth said softly. "People are talking about you everywhere. They say humans have returned." The commander smiled faintly. "We never left. The galaxy just stopped listening." Reth looked at him, eyes filled with gratitude. "And now?" "Now," the commander said, turning toward the stars. "They're finally hearing us again." The Valkyrie glided forward through the night, its engines glowing like a heartbeat in the dark. Inside, laughter and quiet conversation filled the halls. The rescued child played with a small ball near the medbay. Vorak sat with human engineers, learning how their energy systems worked. Reth helped chart new routes on the navigation table. They were no longer passengers, they were part of something larger. As the ship passed through a field of starlight, its reflection shimmered across the void. The Valkyrie wasn't just a warship anymore. It was a beacon, a symbol that light still existed in the darkest corners of space. And though no one said it aloud, every soul aboard knew the truth. Humanity had become the quiet guardians of the stars. They didn't conquer worlds or build empires. They restored faith. Somewhere deep inside the ship, a simple message was carved into a wall plate, small but powerful. It read, "When all else is silent, we will answer." That was the heart of humanity, not in their weapons or their ships, but in their choice to act when no one else would. As the Valkyrie vanished into the distance, leaving trails of light behind, the galaxy began to whisper a new story. Not of fear or war, but of courage, compassion, and the return of a people who refused to give up on anyone. And out there, among 1,000 stars, the promise lived on, that no voice in the dark would ever go unheard again.